I'm a postdoctoral fellow here at Florida State University in Tallahassee, Florida. Basically, that means I'm a research scientist and educator. And tonight I'm going to share about my academic journey in general. I love education very much, and I hope that's the take-home message that you all will learn from me tonight. And that being said, I have always had a passion for education. I'm the first in my family to receive an education in America. I'm my first in my family to go to university, graduate, then go on for a doctorate, and now continue with my interest in becoming a professor one day. I'm the first in my family to work for NASA, starting in high school, and I've been lucky, really, to be involved with NASA ever since. I'm the first in my family to receive an education as an engineer. I've led, supported, and developed projects for NASA, including our Space Launch System, the rocket and the system that will carry our astronauts into space and back to the moon through our Artemis project. I was also involved with the Perseverance rover, our James Webb Space Telescope, and many others. And I've always had an interest in building and fixing things. Though I've also, being an immigrant to this country, I saw the effects of how my immigrant family had to make in terms of sacrifices they had to make and to allow me to pursue my dreams. So from these observations and the lessons learned, I discovered a passion for biology, a study of life, as well as medicine, a study of us, and how medicine is about curing and how to heal lives. And I learned from my family's choices and decisions that education is incredible. I recognize the importance of obtaining knowledge and an education to make educated decisions, and discovered how enriching an education could be. And it's through this mindset that I've been really lucky to touch the stars over and over again through my experiences with NASA. I'm going to share a little bit about with you all today. When I was young, I never thought I could really combine my interest in engineering or medicine. But through an education and the opportunities provided by our space program, NASA, I've been able to reach for the stars to support our human space exploration efforts. This journey is not just to learn more about our universe, but through this journey, learn a lot about ourselves. So before I begin, I'm just curious, have any of you heard about NASA and some projects away with NASA? Don't be shy, you're welcome to go ahead and unmute yourself and feel free to answer if you'd like. No?
No, I haven't. Since nobody else wants to say that, I'll just tell you, no, I haven't.
Okay, well, by the end of the night, you'll learn a lot about NASA. So thank you for joining. NASA is very unique in the sense that it's a program that requires efforts from all disciplines: science, communication, technology, engineering, art, mathematics, law, business, many, many more. And generally, when we think about these different disciplines and occupations, we think of maybe of being separate or not really interacting much with each other. Space exploration, I think, provides us unique opportunity to remind ourselves that these are more interconnected than what we may sometimes think. Our space projects show this by example, how when we, by combining these disciplines, when combined, the kind of incredible projects we complete and kind of incredible feats we can do together. This may be challenging working together from different perspectives and different backgrounds and different experiences. That's also why we do it. Through solving these challenges together, we learn that more about the universe, but also we learn a lot about ourselves. So today I'll share a little bit about my journey with our human space exploration program, how that's related with medicine, how I turn my childhood dreams into reality, and from this journey, I also learned a lot about myself. So to start, I just have a picture here of me from elementary school. And as the arrow here is pointing towards me, you may note that from my sweater that I was wearing in this picture, I showed an early interest in space exploration. My interest of NASA were many. One example being of our International Space Station. This picture of our International Space Station, it was particularly special to me as it showed how our space program and space programs across the world could work together to create this, the first laboratory in space. And it's not just a laboratory, it's also a home for our astronauts to live in space. And it's a place for discovery and innovation, to be able to conduct the kind of experiments that we can't do anywhere else on the world. That's what being involved with NASA in general is like, to be able to kind of work that's the stuff of imagination, but through opportunities provided by NASA, turn them into reality. So my first opportunities with NASA were at the NASA Katherine Johnson Independent Verification and Validation Facility. It's a mouthful, but the facility is located in West Virginia. And some of you may have heard of Katherine Johnson from the movie Hidden Figures. And it happens to be a very small world. I actually grew up in the same town that Katherine Johnson did and went to the same university that she did, Morgantown. On the left here is just a picture of where West Virginia is. And on the bottom left is a picture of the NASA facility I was talking about. And my first steps with NASA through this facility were thanks to my first mentor, Mr. Ken McGill. Picture of us on the top right here in front of a lunar rover at the facility, where he recognized how curious and how I enjoyed asking a lot of questions. And he appreciated that and provided me the opportunity to get involved at NASA IB&D with various projects. My first projects were designing programs for rockets. And I was really excited for this opportunity to support our space program, and was really self-driven to get involved and do all the opportunities that were expected of me, but also I was determined to do things not even considered unrealistic at the time. And in turn, I spent many years at this NASA center. I started in high school and continued in college, and was really blessed to be involved with many projects, some of which I mentioned earlier. Though my most memorable experiences from my time at this NASA center was really the opportunity to interact and work and learn from so many individuals from diverse backgrounds and experiences. And though I enjoyed rocket science and engineering, I was fascinated very much by biology and medicine, though I hadn't at the time yet figured out how to combine these interests with NASA. So I went to college. I stayed close to home, Morgantown, in West Virginia, and attended West Virginia University, primarily for all the opportunities that offered. At WVU, I pursued an education in engineering and biology, with the interest to blend these different disciplines, these different fields, with my interest in space. And a step in this direction was made possible by obtaining hands-on experience through an academic program called the Ronald McNair Scholars Program. This program was organized by the family of a former astronaut, Ronald McNair. Ronald McNair was to be the first African-American in space, though his life and several other astronauts were tragically cut short with the Space Shuttle Challenger accident. So from this event, this tragedy, Ron McNair's spirit lives on through the McNair Scholars Program, a program created by a family of by Ron McNair, first generation academic as well, to support first generation students, such as myself and many others, to obtain early exposure and experience in academic careers. And this early exposure shaped my career trajectory to what it is now, highlighting how, for me, it was incredible to get involved with the kind of these kind of programs early on, and learn a lot of skills and experiences, and learn what things like basic research were like, and get hands-on experience in terms of research and science, and also make a lot of mistakes. I made a lot of mistakes early on, but also importantly learn from those mistakes, and that helped me become successful later on, and now even from the kind of research projects I do now, where the experiences I had as a raw McNair scholar, I still look back and think, I'm still using the lessons learned from those programs now. So through the McNair Scholars Program, I also had the opportunity to interact with friends and peers from all sorts of different backgrounds. Science is also a very interdisciplinary field, including not just medicine, but chemistry, psychology, social sciences. And it was also a great experience interacting with people with all these different interests, and but motivated to learn about what academic research is like. And in turn, also have the opportunity to go to unique places like Florida, the Kennedy Space Center, and see firsthand what those centers are like and the kind of projects they have, and also see history of and learn more about individuals such as Roland McNair. Picture of top right is actually a picture of me at Kennedy Space Center in Florida, where they have a hallway of the astronauts, Roland McNair and many more from the Challenger accident, highlighting the mission itself and sharing a little bit about their backgrounds and their stories, how they got involved with NASA and the impact they have left since. Now, I've highlighted how getting involved with education early shaped my academic career. NASA fostered this and supported this, supported my curiosity. And also had the opportunity by another opportunity, including designing, building, and flying experiments on aircraft that simulated weightlessness in space. Picture on the top left and bottom left are pictures of my team and I, where we were getting, top left, we were getting ready to fly on board the aircraft in the background that is the aircraft that simulates microgravity. And bottom left is a picture of us actually completing our experiment and experiencing being weightless itself. On the right is a picture of us at mission control at NASA Johnson Space Center. And these were all incredible moments in my life, for not only the opportunity to, again, visit these places and learn the history, learn what those, what the centers, the kind of projects they have ongoing, learn and get to meet from astronauts and NASA scientists and engineers, and hear about all the different ways to get involved and opportunities there are with NASA. Well, this was also a defining moment for myself, where I got to recognize how, through experiencing microgravity, that there exists such a field of medicine in space, which before this was just a personal dream of mine. And now at that time, it became a reality, all made possible through educational opportunities. So having made this discovery, I continued my academic steps by moving to Texas from West Virginia to begin my doctoral study of studying how astronauts adapt in space. So a doctorate is a very specialized time where one focuses on very specific scientific questions. So I'm curious, have any of you completed any science experiments in the past, or have any planned?
If the ones from the science fair count, or the ones
that
teachers used to make us do.
Is it Samari?
Yes.
Samari, could you share a little bit more about your science experiment at the science fair?
It was just like which material, like which paper material absorbs grease better, like a regular sheet of paper or like paper towel.
Okay, so the observation you made with your experiment was looking at material and asking the question if it could absorb, how it absorbs grease. Is that correct?
Which one could absorb the most grease?
The most grease, okay. So you're, in that experiment, you're comparing different types of materials and then seeing how they absorb the grease. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you have a hypothesis of why maybe certain materials would absorb grease better than others?
No, I didn't, because like I kind of failed the project because I didn't have a hypothesis, but it was just a project I did.
That's okay. So some science experiments can have a hypothesis, but I think you had a hypothesis there where your question was thinking about the materials and how they respond to grease. And that's a really fascinating question. Something I'm aware of, even there's a lot of research at the doctoral or a lot of professors do that kind of research to see how, one, those materials, how they behave, even responding to grease. And then also thinking about how those materials are different. Where science is an opportunity to think about how anything that one may observe, how that compares with something else, and if there are any differences between the two objects or however many things one is comparing. Thanks, Samari, for sharing. May I ask if anyone else has been involved in any science experiments or maybe thought about science experiments before?
I have.
Is that Amani?
Yes.
Okay, Amani, do you mind sharing a little bit about any science experiments you've done or have thought about?
Well, I remember the science experiment that I did. It was like in the 5th grade, I think, where I had to throw a ball and see how far I went and like keep, like basically testing my strength, basically, to see how far I can throw the ball. It was like something simple. That's the only one I can really remember.
So if I understood you correctly, your science experiment was throwing a ball and seeing how far it went. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, that's a really important experiment because that's testing and investigating the effects of gravity, right?
Right, right.
And how does gravity play a role in that kind of experiment?
It's determining how far the ball goes, I guess.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So, so the observation in your experiment was the ball and testing the hypothesis of the effect of gravity, where that's an incredibly important.
Sorry if you can hear the sirens in the back. I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay. That's exactly what what NASA studies are. Many of them ask as well, because one of the most challenging factors that make it difficult to go into space is, would anyone guess?
Gravity.
Gravity, yeah. So gravity is exactly how Amani's ball experiment is what determines whether our NASA projects can go into space or not. So all these experiments that I've shared and will be describing are really thinking about the effects of gravity on whether it may be rockets or, in particular, in my research area, is how gravity affects us. So during my PhD, I study the effects of gravity and how it affects us. as people, we are made up of many different organs, such as the heart. We have muscles, we have bones, we have immune system, and all of those respond to our environment in different ways. Now, when we're in a spaceflight environment, that's a totally new environment. And the spaceflight environment lacks a very important factor that is found here on Earth. Would anyone like to guess what that factor is? We've been talking about it. Gravity. So space, there's no gravity. That's in the picture a moment ago I showed of us conducting the experiment when we were weightless. That was a test to see the effects of a lack of gravity. So when we travel into space, our bodies adapt to being in space and adapt to being in a weightless environment, an environment that lacks gravity. And that's why I'm Sarah astronauts when I travel into space. My research focus was studying how these astronauts adapt to a lack of gravity, but also from these research questions, we learned about how our bodies adapt in general and provide a different perspective as to how we can do research of medical conditions here on Earth.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, please do.
So, do you plan on going to space?
Do I plan on going to space?
Mm-hmm.
Was that your question?
That's my question.
I prefer one of you all would go into space. I think it'd be really cool to see one of you all go into space. But if I had the opportunity, I'd probably go into space too. But I enjoy studying about our astronauts traveling into space and seeing how they adapt to the environment. It's fascinating because that kind of experience also provides us a new way to think about medicine here on Earth. As there are many ways to study what happens to us when we travel in space, not only just by going into space. For example, there are many science facilities across the United States and the world that one can conduct experiments that simulate what it's like to be in space. One example includes a place in New York called Brookhaven National Lab that simulates the environment in deep space. And here I am, just pictured with a few of my colleagues, and at the facility, we're all from different backgrounds and have different experiences. Some of us are engineers, some of us are biologists, some of us are physicians, some of us have a medical background, some of us are professors, some of us are undergraduate students, graduate students. So there are many different people involved with these kind of projects, and bringing in different experiences and different perspectives to learn big picture how we adapt in the space. Another example is a more local one of an experiment that did actually travel into space. So here are just some pictures of our science team. On the top right is a picture of myself with the entire science group of scientists from Florida, from North Carolina, from Texas, from Kansas, from California, and many other locations, all joining together, again, from all experiences and backgrounds, from undergraduate level to professors, from engineers to scientists to mathematicians to educators to those in communication, joining together to very comprehensively study how we adapt to being in space. And would anyone like to take a guess why we have so many people involved with these kind of projects?
I could guess, but because the project is difficult and it takes teamwork.
Teamwork. projects are, Tiona, thank you so much for your response. Teamwork makes these projects less difficult, but also teamwork brings in, anyone take a guess? What does teamwork allow us to do?
Share,
yeah.
Oh, sorry. To
no,
share like to share like different ideas of what they learn, like their perspective of the situation.
Amia, thank you so much for your response. Yes, different perspective, different opinions, and being involved in different ways. These projects have the science projects, NASA projects in general, have many moving parts, and it's helpful to have many team members involved. So all these parts are continuing to move, but also are moving together, all in one emotion. And also, Jennifer had mentioned that different opinions. That's also fascinating to consider with our space exploration projects, because there are so many things that spaceflight has an effect on. And having more opinions, having more perspectives involved allows us to think about these questions or ask multiple questions and ask, hear from different opinions and ask more science questions. And in turn, the more questions we answer or we think about and answer, what do you all think happens? Anyone want to take a guess?
Ideas become theories, theories become questions, questions get answered.
Samari, thank you so much for your answer. Exactly. So Samari had mentioned that there's a process, and ultimately they lead to answers or more information, if anything. More information with regards to the questions that we had at the beginning. And that's what science is really about. It's really about asking questions and then going through a process like Samari had highlighted, and learning from that process, gaining new information, and comparing them with our hypotheses. Whether our starting hypotheses are right or wrong, it doesn't really matter. What matters really information, the evidence that we gain from the science experiment. And that educates us in the context of whatever the context may be. In the examples that we've been talking about, they include gravity, they include materials, they include spaceflight projects. But the process for all these different circumstances are all the same. Asking questions, going through a series of steps to answer those questions, and then learning from those questions. And our space projects are a unique opportunity to think about how progress is made, because our human space exploration projects, they started from rocket launches, like the picture here on the bottom right, where we were just sending rockets into space. We hadn't gone to the moon yet. We haven't gone to Mars yet. We haven't had an International Space Station forever. But through developing these projects and trying new projects and trying new ways to go into space, such as SpaceX. SpaceX is a new way of going into space where they've designed rockets that are reusable. Just like an airplane, where when an airplane goes up, it lands and then can be flown again. SpaceX is the first organization to do the same thing with rockets. And in turn, if we can go to space more easily, what do y'all think that allows us to do?
Be able to go from one planet to the next.
Definitely do that. We can definitely go into space more more easily, and also further than ever before. And that's what this spaceflight medical mission was about. With the mission patch here in the bottom left. That is mission patch for Road Research 9, one of the first biomedical missions to study the health effects of how astronauts' heart and brains adapt to being in space, as there are unique adaptations when astronauts are in space for a long period of time and are not exposed to gravity. So this was one of the first investigations of that area, and asking the question of if the longer we stay in space, are there unique adaptations that we haven't seen before? So in short, there are, and we're continuing scientific investigations where we're gathering information and testing multiple hypotheses to see how these adaptations occur, why they occur, and also how to potentially solve them as well. So I talked about how there are many different NASA programs and opportunities. Another NASA center that has a lot of opportunities includes NASA Johnson Space Center, where mission control is located, I pictured before, and where most of our human space exploration efforts take place. NASA Johnson Space Center is actually located in Texas, not here in Florida, but I had a summer-long opportunity to visit the center and be involved with the biomedical research program, which is a specific branch of NASA Johnson Space Center, where the focus is all about medicine in space. And there were a large number of, again, group of undergraduate, graduate, and engineers, scientists from all across the world for this summer experience at NASA Johnson Space Center, being involved with projects including studying the effects of how bone adapts to being in space from a perspective of a material, studying how astronauts walk differently and how that may affect their ability to conduct experiments in space. We also got to hear from astronauts such as Sonny Williams and David Wolf, and hear from their experiences how what it was like to actually be in space, but also conduct scientific experiments in space. Would anyone like to take a guess on the question if space experiments or conducting experiments of space is different than conducting experiments here on Earth?
Is it because space don't have no gravity?
Yes.
Something like that?
Yes. So without gravity in space, experiments on space are also different. Anyone else?
Wouldn't the experiments be more challenging?
I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Wouldn't the experiments be more challenging?
The experiments are certainly more challenging. Why do you think they would be more challenging?
Well, because someone else said that there's like no gravity, and like here there is gravity, so it's like I guess more easier on here than over there on space.
Yes, so there's lack of gravity and a totally different environment. So there are limitations in the kind of experiments that can be done in space, but also true for any science experiment, where depending on the field, depending on the questions, depending on the environment, depending on the tools available to answer science questions, requires thinking about how to complete a science experiment. That's also very much true with any science experiment, where Samari had mentioned doing an experiment with different materials and looking at grease. That's a really fascinating science question. Though with regards to the investigation, depending on the materials that can be tested, that will also determine the kind of questions that can be hypothesized. And that's also true with biomedical questions, biomedical research questions. Depending on the kind of biomedical research questions and the tools available, there are limitations to how much information we can gather, and in turn, how much evidence we can gather to compare and test our hypotheses. So when conducting science experiments, we complete these experiments and then gather the information that we have, but we don't answer all our questions. So that's how science continues to progress and lead to more questions compared to when we first started, actually, generally speaking. So that's why we also have so many students and so many individuals involved with our human space exploration projects. There are so many projects, and as we complete these projects, we end up learning a lot of information, learning a lot about ourselves, but end up also with more questions than perhaps we may have started with at the beginning of an experiment. So also at this NASA Center, I also wish to highlight just some different experiment situations that allow us to study and test to see what it's like to complete a mission on the moon or a mission in space. As we've been talking about, the environment is very different. For example, on the top left here is a picture of a habitat called HERA, which stands for Human Exploration Research Analog. Now, this is a habitat similar to what one may experience if one were to go camping, where you have limited resources, you have limited food, you're in a distant environment. Cell phone service isn't very good. Communication is very different. And astronauts would go in this habitat and complete simulations to simulate what it's like to be in space and go through different procedures and train in that regard. So they're prepared for their actual mission when they go into space. In the top middle here, there's a picture of a vehicle that astronauts will use when we return to the moon. And when landing on the moon, one way they will get around. It looks a little different from, say, a car or a bus or vehicles here on Earth, again, because of the different environment. And correspondingly, the habitat has to be also maintained differently than a vehicle here on Earth. It has to have its own cabin. It has to have its own supply of oxygen. It has to have its own set of equipment so astronauts can stay protected while they're in the vehicle and roving on the surface of the moon. And then similarly, on the top right is an image of what's called the crew module, or the habitat that astronauts will sit inside of when they're resting on before they take off from the rocket. So this is part of the rocket. They get inside, they wear their spacesuits, and then they take off, and then they'll be transported in this habitat on their journey to the International Space Station, or to the moon, or to Mars one day. And then similarly, there are many other facilities that are located at NASA Johnson Space Center to allow the crew to simulate being in space. There's a large pool that has mock-ups, such as like this top left environment, submerged in the pool, where astronauts will get into spacesuits and then dive into this pool and interact with these different modules. Now, if you're swimming, does anyone mind sharing what it feels like when they're swimming?
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work, okay? It takes a lot of effort, right? And when one is swimming, one is floating, right?
Yes.
So that floating sensation and the effort required to swim is very much like being in space, where the floating sensation is similar to electric gravity, but then also the amount of effort to keep swimming is similar to how astronauts, when they're in space, how they have to adapt to being in space. And in turn, their bodies adapt to constantly swimming, so to speak. In turn, it's a different set of mechanics and behavior that astronauts have to being in space. So they go through a lot of training, a lot of experience here on Earth to prepare for eventually traveling into space. Now, in conclusion, as a postdoctoral scientist here at Florida State, I'm continuing my support of NASA's space program, being involved with biomedical studies for when we go back to the moon, and traveling to Mars through our Artemis program. And you all are the Artemis generation, so to speak. You all will help us return to the moon. So in turn, I look forward to seeing your dreams become reality through education opportunity, and look forward to perhaps some of you supporting our human space exploration efforts through NASA or through medicine. So thank you all for having me, and I'm happy to also take any more questions that you all may have, or go back and share some more details of what I presented.
Anybody have any
I
questions?
have a question.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through all your journey, which one was the best part? Like, which one did you absolutely love?
Thanks for that question. My favorite experience was getting to visit really any of the NASA Johnson Space Center, Kennedy Space Center, the Katherine Johnson Independent Verification Validation Facility, and getting to see those projects, but also interact with the NASA scientists, engineers, educators, and learning about how they got involved with NASA, learning about how their experiences we're connected with the kind of projects that are involved with NASA. It's really a lot of fun to hear of everyone involved with NASA, but also NASA also has many individuals outside NASA centers that support a human space exploration program. Myself as one example, there are many NASA scientists, engineers, biologists, chemists at universities that are also involved in NASA. So there are many, many ways to get involved.
We had another question in the chat. Jennifer wants to know, did you have any struggles or obstacles that you faced throughout your career?
Thanks, Jennifer, for your question. I had many struggles and obstacles throughout my career. And I enjoyed those struggles and obstacles because I think for myself, at least, those were the experiences where I learned the most about myself, but also learned about the most about the project I was working with, or the team experience, and as a team figuring out how to solve an obstacle or get over an obstacle, or and that's also very much true with our human space exploration.
That's not funny.
Where NASA projects are a great example of how, I think someone had mentioned how they're challenging, yes, but overcoming those challenges is really what space exploration is about. And that's also very much true with medicine, where science questions can be, there are a lot of questions that can be asked. And a challenge sometimes can be thinking about a science question that is relevant and applicable to the NASA project or to the medical circumstance. And I learned that accepting that and trial and error and learning from that has always been incredibly helpful, and learning a lot that way too.
When it comes to like collecting your data and your answers are inaccurate, is working backwards a good option? Like, have you ever had to work backwards to get an accurate answer?
Yes, so there are certainly, thank you, Samari, for that question. There are certainly experiments where the experimental results are unexpected or are different from what I or others hypothesized initially. And that's part of science too, where it's not so much my hypothesis being right or wrong, but rather seeing what the data has to show, and then confirming also that the data is consistent. So there's certainly occasions where science experiments have failed, but that's when it helps to practice in advance and be very well prepared. Planning is also very important to allow time to check and test to see anything related to a science experiment, whether that that is operating in a manner that we are expecting it to be. And if not, it provides us an opportunity to figure out how to correct for it or adjust it. It's similar like cooking, where if I were cooking with a recipe and after making a soup, I take a sample of the soup and it's not salty enough. So with the scientific method being the process of going through of cooking the soup. And I rather do that and test the soup before sharing with my friends, and then my friends come back to me and say, it's all not salty enough. But I've done the experiment. I've gone through the recipe. I've noticed it's not salty enough, so I can adjust the recipe, adjust the experiment, add a little bit more extra salt, and then I'll make my friends a little happier too.
So we have another question in the chat from Jennifer. Do you have a question or a hypothesis about space that the answer hasn't been discovered yet?
Thanks, Jennifer, for that question. Yes, I have many questions and many hypotheses that I haven't answered yet, but hopefully maybe you can answer it for us one day.
Anybody else have any questions? We have time for about one more question, maybe.
I have a question. When you first went to NASA, wait, I said it right? NASA? I think I said it right. But when you first went there, was you nervous or like was you just really excited?
I was very nervous, incredibly nervous, because it was a really incredible opportunity, and I was nervous about making mistakes. Though I learned that, but I was also incredibly excited. So I think, so it was a combination of two, I don't think really helped. But I learned that especially when I was new, that any new experience, being nervous is part of that experience, and recognizing that and being aware of where what one may be nervous about can help with those nerves. When I first started with NASA, with any project, even now, there are projects I still get nervous about. Will continue to become nervous about, because that's part of science. It's part of discovery, where each science experiment is a new experiment. My hypotheses are educated expectations, but the science experiment may be a totally different answer. So I get nervous thinking about, well, the answer that I see from my science experiment will be what I have in mind. But it's totally okay. As through experience, one learns how to answer those nerves. If I didn't have a lot of experience with a certain subject, that was important for me to know, that was related to biology or medicine, I'd make sure I'd spend extra time to learn about that. So if I were to be asked a question, or if I was tested, or if I had an experiment that required that information, I did my homework and I learned how to calm those nerves. And also, I was also nervous about having perfect experiments or having perfect results, having programs that were perfect, because NASA opportunities, or any science experiment, are unique opportunities to do something that's never been done before. So I was nervous about making a mistake and not having an effect on the experience of the experiment. And what I've learned throughout my experience is that it's not practical to be perfect about everything. There's going to be parts to an experiment, or parts to an experience, or something that may take place that is totally unexpected. And that's actually a huge part of science, knowing how to, learning about those and how to take account for those. And it's funny, actually, the number of science experiments that result from unexpected observations. That's how a lot of discoveries are made from projects that I had a lot of nerves about, didn't think they would be successful projects or result in new information that was interesting or novel. But after completing the experiments, I was proven wrong, and it turned out to be more interesting or exciting than I had originally thought. So I think I have less nerves now compared to when I first started as a NASA scientist. But now I think I enjoy those nerves very much because it's a reminder that I'm doing something new and different.
Great. Well, Dr. Sunny, I want to thank you for being here with us and sharing all this important information. And to all the students, if you didn't get a question in, or maybe you were a little embarrassed to ask it, please go ahead and email it to me. I have contact with Dr. Sunny, and he has expressed that he'd be happy to answer any questions via email after as well. So I just want to thank everybody for coming, and have a good night, everyone.